Peter Schweizer, thank you so much for joining.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Peter, your book, Blood Money, details China's historical weaponization of drugs against the United States, tracing it back to the Opium Wars and culminating in the precision deployment of the lethal fentanyl, which we're seeing a crisis throughout our country over the past many years now. Can you elaborate on the military-like precision of this weaponization?
Yeah, I think one of the big misnomers about fentanyl is that this is primarily an operation of the Mexican drug cartels. They're in fact the junior partners. Just look at every link in the chain. The precursors, of course, many people know come from China. They arrive in the port of Manzanillo in Mexico. That port is actually run by a Chinese company. The precursors are then sent to a town in northern Mexico where 2,000 Chinese nationals help the drug cartels turn these precursors into the cocktail. They then have to put them in pill form. So what do? They import at cost pill presses and pill molds from China. Once they actually have produced the pills, the drug cartels now need secure communications to distribute this poison across America. What do? They use Chinese communication devices and apps because they know that China will not share those communications with U.S. law enforcement. And then the final link in the chain is the money laundering process. Used to be that the Mexican drug cartels launder their money in Latin American banks. Now they use Chinese state-owned banks, and they often use Chinese students in the United States on education visas. So this is a Chinese operation with support from the Mexican drug cartels.
Peter, if you could tell us, what is the CCP's ultimate goal in deploying this fentanyl into the United States?
Well, it's part of what they call disintegration warfare. There was actually a book written by that title in 2012. There was an earlier book called Unrestricted Warfare. And both of these books have been embraced by President Xi. And the strategy basically says they want to fragment, harm, and disintegrate American society. And drugs are a component of that. There are other things that they are doing, but they have had a lot of success in a terrible way in this area, because of course fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for people in America under the age of 45, and it's deployed as a sort of hidden weapon. The vast majority of the people that are dying of fentanyl poisoning don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking a Vicodin or an Adderall. So this is a weapon that is really crippling American society and costing us some of our best and brightest.
Peter, talk to us about TikTok, that social media application. It came out of committee unanimously to ban it essentially. And then there's been a little bit of a discussion about First Amendment. Where do you stand on shifting TikTok's ownership outside of China?
Well, I think the shifting that ownership is essential. Of course, I have concerns about other social media companies as well. But TikTok is unique. It's not just a Chinese company and the concerns that come with the Chinese state imposing their will on Chinese companies. It's a Chinese company that's essentially joined at the hip with the Chinese state. Let's remember that this all-important algorithm that is so addictive and so effective in giving target audiences what they want is not only a company secret, the Chinese government actually declared it a state secret. ByteDance, the parent company for TikTok, does extensive joint research on artificial intelligence and other subjects with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, which is their spy agency. It's the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA all rolled into one. So this is not just a Chinese company. It's a company that works hand in glove with the Chinese state. And as I quote extensively in my book, Blood Money, they are quite open amongst themselves as how effective this tool is to manipulate young people in the West and to use it as a tool of propaganda. One military official calls it the ultimate Trojan horse. So I think for that reason, it needs to be sold. The sale needs to be forced, and I think the bill is a good one.
Peter, lastly, speaking of propaganda, whenever the noise starts to get, the level starts to raise and people start to focus on China, the CCP rolls out their propaganda saying that, you're being racist and, are targeting us like they did when the CCP virus left China into the United States. Help us sort of distinguish between the Chinese people and the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, no, that's the key distinction. And look, let's go back and look at the history here. The Chinese Communist Party is guided by Marxism-Leninism. Karl Marx was not Chinese. Vladimir Lenin was not Chinese. If you look at this from the Chinese perspective, this is sort of a Western hateful ideology that was imposed on China by this small cadre of revolutionaries like Chairman Mao, who were educated by these Western outlets. So no, there's a huge distinction between the CCP and the Chinese people. In fact, the biggest victims of the CCP are actually the Chinese people themselves. So that's a misdirection, a misnomer, and we ought to dismiss it and get back to the core issues here and not let them play this race card.
Peter Schweizer with a very powerful new book, Blood Money. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.